Hello and welcome. I'm Julie Fogel, the Marketing Director at CurioWorks, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, OnBase Document Composition and Packaging, where we'll discuss ways to leverage your existing data, whether that's stored in OnBase or another application, to become more productive. There are a number of benefits to doing so. Among them, you create more accurate documents faster, eliminating those potential legal and compliance risks, and consistently and efficiently producing standardized documents and communications. But before I introduce today's speakers, a few housekeeping items for us. We have muted all attendees' microphones, but of course we want to make sure that you're able to engage with us. So please do utilize the chat box Q&A feature to drop questions on the topic or simply share a struggle or experience as we touch on those topics throughout today's presentation. We'll be monitoring that chat box throughout the session. We are recording today's webinar, and we will share a link to the session for you to revisit or to share with colleagues. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. John Swisher joined CurioWorks as a senior sales engineer in 2014. He's held various roles in solution development before becoming our vice president of sales and product in December of 2020. Dan Smith also joins us today, and for the past 6 years, Dan has served as CurioWorks senior sales engineer, putting to use more than those 17 years of experience he has implementing OnBase and CurioWorks solutions in the payer and provider space. We'll start today with a new twist. We'll start today with a quick poll to assess the level of experience our attendees have with DocComp, or OnBase Document Composition, DocComp for short. So please do fill out that poll. And John, as those are coming in, I think I'll kick it off to you.
No, that's perfect. And thank you everyone for attending. It looks like as we get those polls coming through, a few for document composition, a few for document packaging, but it seems like most everyone here is here for both, which is a good sign. And hopefully that's just because we may not know what those are yet, right? We've went through our kind of quick poll here, but for those of you who maybe aren't aware, what exactly does document composition do? And we'll kind of do this same thing for document packets. And before we get to that, we kind of have the second portion of our poll, and based off of your answer, and for the majority of everyone selecting both, you know, do we want to learn more about the product? I'm not super familiar with it. I've used it, I'm pretty good at it, I'm looking to learn more. I'm an expert, teach me something I don't know. And hopefully everyone kind of falls into one of those different categories, and we can answer all of those for everyone. So again, thank you for attending. Thank you for submitting your answers to these polls. It'll kind of help Dan and I dynamically modify this webinar to kind of suit everyone as we go through. So getting right into document composition, what does it do for us? What does it do for organizations? And actually, we're looking at the poll, and it looks like a lot of folks are just interested in learning more, which is that's what we were hoping. We're going to try and educate as much as possible here. So again, what does document composition do? Well, if you're familiar with a document like this that you're accessing daily, or if you've ever received a piece of correspondence from an organization that you do business with, or you've ever received an invoice, chances are a solution like document composition created that in an automated fashion for folks. And when I show what's on screen here, for some of our healthcare organizations, particularly payers, this may look familiar to you, right? And this is a letter out to one of your members. So all of us here have customers, right? This is essentially a customer service example. And what a lot of organizations who don't have a tool like document composition do is they have a whole lot of these, what we call templates, likely out on a network share, and they have areas that we know we may need to change based off of data that we're sending to that customer that we may need to add into here. And if we look at this example here, it's things like the organization name, who we're mailing this to, things about their geographic location or portions of the year. And then even depending on, we may be an organization that has multiple organizations underneath it. So we may need to even have different headers, different footers in there as well. And for organizations doing this today, I'm sure you can imagine this is a pretty big lift for a couple of different reasons we'll get into, but one of them is finding the right template, right? And then ensuring that we have the right information in there. And then even that takes a certain amount of time that we can fully automate. So we take something like what you're seeing here, and what does document composition do? And it essentially turns it into a dynamic document. So all of those different areas that you saw me highlighting yellow are now essentially lookups right into your OnBase system, into your other line of business systems, so that that data comes across automatically. And if we zoom in here a little bit, these are essentially called in OnBase terms fragments or placeholders. And anytime you see those in that kind of that font type inside of these templates, you know that it's either grabbing data from an OnBase workview object or an OnBase document, or related data that isn't even in OnBase. And we'll get to a little bit more of that here shortly. So if we look at what we're doing today potentially with our templates, and again, whether or not those are our letters to our customers, those are invoices, those are contracts that we're creating, what we're doing is we're trying to automate the generation and then also the delivery of those. So this is a very simple but good slide because as I was talking about earlier, whether or not that data is in OnBase, maybe it's in a third-party application that we need to pull that member or that customer info into that we may not fully have in our AP solution within OnBase, right? Or maybe sometimes this requires a user decision, something that we cannot fully automate. Well, in the generation of that, we can also prompt for user entry, and whether or not that's free text or that's a dropdown, which we would prefer, we have a lot of flexibility. And then again, even that data in OnBase, whether or not that's very simple metadata or it's data that has been compiled into a table. If we think about invoices, those can get fairly complex, but we can automate the generation of all of that. So very quickly, what I want to do is provide a quick walkthrough of just the tool and some of its basic functionality. So I'm going to pull in a Microsoft Word window here. Now, you're probably asking me, well, you're in Microsoft Word, what does this have to do with document composition? Well, for those of you unfamiliar, it is actually an add-in that is built directly into Word. So we will simply install that add-in, and you now have an additional section of your toolbar to be able to interact with OnBase and these templates, right? These are called document composition templates. So along the ribbon here, you're going to see some pieces of new functionality, and you heard me talk about placeholders and fragments. And again, as I select any one of these, we can see we have some new configuration over here on the right. Now, if I want to get to all of those variables, I can simply click on that placeholders up here in the top left, and these are delineated by the type of placeholder it is. So just real quickly, something like a document fragment, that can be dynamic data, that can be static data, that can be a combination of the two. And typically what we use fragments for are things like the header, the mailing address, the footer, things that are fairly static, that are in every single letter. Things even like organization name, because depending on your customer base, you may be known as a different organization to different bases of your customers. So even simple things like that can make a very big difference. Properties are items that we're using on this particular document. So as you start to mature your document composition strategy or your document generation strategy, you start to invest in automating it even further into workflows. And we use a lot of this functionality right here. So later on, when Dan goes to say, hey, we're going to generate a packet, one of the things that we do with our solutions is use properties to say, hey, this particular template or document type should be part of that review packet. And we just hard code that right into the document. And in this case, it is. So when we get into this configuration and I go to set this up, I'm really just choosing a property. There's nothing to draw from an OnBase perspective. Choose my property, and then I'll continue. We'll go through any type of display style that isn't important here, any case correction that isn't important here, required placeholders not required, but then ultimately that keyword mapping. And what we're getting to is we're saving that as a keyword that says, yes, this is a part of the review packet. So when this document gets generated, that keyword is automatically on it. And that's something that's worth mentioning here as well. As we're going through any of these values that we would set up, you can set that to a keyword value regardless of whether or not it came in as a keyword or an attribute or from a third-party system. Now, if we wanted to create a new one, maybe we want to get the actual service that is involved. In this case, again, we're initially either tracking those from a work view object or a document. And you can see here, it's just giving me my classes. Maybe it might be documents and keywords. I'll select that value. I'll hit continue. Now we do have a little bit of control over how we want to display that. So we can build out a custom mask, or if we want that value barcoded to scan later, maybe there's a date type. And if you think about dates, those are important. There may be some regulations where you have to spell that date all the way out. And we know in a database, it's only carrying the numbers. So we can take that date and reformat those. And then additionally, for folks of you who are familiar with the back end of OnBase and the keywords, you'll notice that majority of your keywords are probably all caps unless you have a newer OnBase system. And simple things like being able to take those values and convert them to a proper noun when that is delivered does make a big difference to your customer base. I know when I get a document, maybe it's because I'm familiar with document composition, but when I see my info in all caps and it doesn't fit very well within the document, it's just a little unnerving for me. Maybe I'm particular. And then again, whether or not we want these to be required or saved in a keyword at the end of that particular generation. Just real quickly, getting into some template options. You have the ability to name your template, choose the actual document type that this generated document becomes when it's automatically uploaded into CureWorks, and then whether or not you want to inherit the keywords, disable the import dialog, and we'll get into a little bit of that later, or have that document pop for you after it was archived. So these are set at the template level and they can be overridden in workflows. We get to that as well. From a formatting perspective, you can save these and output them in Word, PDF, or as an image file. We can automatically send these after they've been generated through this template, but again, we prefer to kind of work those within workflow. And then additionally, if you have any scripts for additional lookups or actions after the generation, you can store those here as well. And then lastly, individual user group security. So there's a combination of whether or not users can access these templates, whether they can generate it, and then if there are segments within the actual letter itself that we don't want them to be able to modify. So if there's contract language or organizationally approved language that we don't want our users changing, we can lock that down so that only certain users have the ability to do that. As we go through, you have the ability to open additional templates and you can search for them in any certain way. And you can see here, we have ours kind of configured into the type of letter that would be generated. So you have the ability to organize them for different departments, different use cases. And then you have the ability to preview these. Now, in this example, we're generating this from a work view object and you don't have right out of the box the ability to generate these and test them from WorkView. Dan will get into that a little bit later, but if you are basing these off of a document, you can easily choose any document within OnBase and test the generation from it all right from inside Word. So this is a really big advancement in my opinion, especially for the folks that are self-sufficient, those departments that are self-sufficient. You now have the ability to control these and keep them organized and not have to rely on IT to make any of these changes for you. The best part about it is as soon as these changes are made and that template is saved, the next time that is generated, it's effective for you. So you don't have to wait for IT to do a reset. You don't have to wait a day for the app pools to reset. It's instant. So what are some quick measurable benefits that we get from document composition? Well, one, again, it standardizes your library. The example that I showed is kind of halfway along, right? We have organizations that we work with that are very mature in their document composition strategy to where the entire template is almost all placeholders or fragments. And then they're utilizing a secondary master to be able to change all of those static languages and all of those mappings when any of those changes are necessary. The other thing it does is it improves our accuracy and integrity, right? Because we're not relying on users to find the correct template. We're not relying on users to punch information in or highlight sections and redo that language. In an ideal world, we're always bringing that information in. We shouldn't have duplicate data, and we shouldn't be implementing or inputting that duplicate data as well. Chances are we already have the information. Let's bring it across. Let's mitigate errors, fat fingers, things like that. And then lastly, what I just got kind of done covering is this is all within Microsoft Word. So I'd be willing to bet that most folks on this webinar all have access to Word or an equivalent of it. And again, these can be created so that they're configured and created on the back end, either in fully automated way, or we'll see again when Dan shows us the ability to just ad hoc generate that, and that's very helpful from a testing perspective as well. So from a timing perspective, we're running just a tad bit behind, so I'm going to push through document packaging pretty quickly and make sure that Dan has time to walk through these. But this is a newer one, a little bit newer than document composition. But what is document packaging? What does it do? Well, I like this one because the name is very straightforward. It takes all of your documents and it puts them into a packet for you, one consolidated PDF. One of the interesting things that I really like about it and really useful is it doesn't matter if your document in OnBase is an image, if it's a Word document, if it's an email, if it's a Unity form, if it's text, or if it's PDF. Document packets will create an image version of that and ultimately consolidate that into a single PDF. And these, the great part, just like document composition, these can be generated in an ad hoc manner or completely automated behind the scenes. And I think Dan has an example of showing that automated behind the scenes. But what you will get with that when that packet is presented to you is a very similar window to your document separation window. And what's nice is it will generate all the table of contents, a header, a footer if you would like. It will allow you to preview the packet like you're seeing here, and additionally allow you to add documents, remove documents, change the order of the documents within this packet, and even change the order of the pages within the documents in the packet, as well as view the keywords. So as that document or that packet's generated, you've completely eliminated the time of finding all of the appropriate documents, getting them into a folder, loading them into your PDF tool, and then ordering them here. The other great part about this is you preset the order. So there is hopefully minimal user interaction when they're presented with this screen. And then lastly, again, I just wanted to quickly show the table of contents. That is actually pre-built in to packets as well. And if we think about, some of our customer-facing documents that can be, 10, 20, hundreds of pages, this can be very helpful. And they are clickable. So that table of contents, if you were to click on, employee IE9 form for Andrew Lincoln, it would take you directly to the 10th page. Quick measurable benefits from a document packets perspective, a lot of the ones from document composition still exist, right? We're taking some of the great things about document composition, and we're just extending that by being able to combine any type of document we would like at any given time or as part of a workflow. Again, so we're automatically gathering, we're automatically creating, and we're removing the likelihood of user error, right? Or the conversion of those documents into a PDF before we could even combine them. So you have your predefined order of documents. You can choose whether or not you want a header or a footer. That can be dynamic. You can choose whether or not you want to have a table of contents, and again, those links to jump to the pages within the documents as well. Now, I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing me talk for the past 20 minutes. I'm going to pass this over to Dan for the live demonstration portion. And while he gets his system kind of rolling and ready to show, I think he had planned on showing kind of the ad hoc generation of a document, kind of the automated generation of a document built into a workflow, and then kind of the live packet interaction. Was that right, Dan?
That is correct.
Perfect.
All right. Yes, so what you're seeing on my screen now is our contracting solution that we have in-house. From this user experience, it's very simple. As John mentioned, we just have a button, compose draft contract. This automatically tells the system what document composition template to use, picks that automatically, captures all those attributes off the screen that we need to put into that document composition template, and then displays it on the screen for me.
So I think that's an interesting point, Dan, as we wait for that to show up on the screen. And I don't know if everyone caught, but when I was showing that open, we have a lot of templates in our system. Sometimes you want to search for it. And when you aren't taking advantage of, the automation aspect of this on the back end, it can be overwhelming for users to make sure they're choosing the right template. So whenever possible, let's make it simple for them and have the system choose the template for them.
Exactly. Yeah, so you could see right off the bat the contract ID, the organization, all of those elements were those fragments or those placeholders that John showed you during his demonstration. So that is all placed in here. We can edit certain areas if we need to, and go through and make any changes on the fly as we go through this document. But just to keep it easy, there's an accept button in the top left, a redo. Maybe you had to change a field within the application and you want to bring that field in, just click redo, cancel, or print from here. In this case, we're just going to accept. This is fully built into our workflow solution. So once we accept that, that's saving that as a document within OnBase. And then it's either going to a print queue, going to an email queue where we could email that out if that's something your customers allow.
And that redo, Dan, that saved me a couple of times, I know, because I've been in there modifying something and then I've maybe highlighted too much and deleted. And all that redo does is take you back to kind of that original format if you mess something up. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I made a change and I don't remember what I did. Redo. All set.
Exactly. Perfect. In this case, we have our activities down here, and each of these activities perform a different action. So I'm just going to choose the acknowledgement letter generation. Again, we are telling the system based on this activity which letter to do. The user doesn't have to pick the letter. So if we just choose generate letter, it'll bring up that letter and the appropriate document composition template. And this is the exact template that John showed you. So you could see the fragment we had in the header, that one little fragment in here contained all this detail. So the logo, the address, everything for this organization. We have the dates, the member name, member ID, all that different information, the payer information, key dates, all built in there. And again, those bullet points with those specific dates that John pointed out in his composition, and all those details were automatically pushed into this when we generated that template.
Yeah, and one thing we don't mention very often is, those can even be dynamic in that, hey, we're either going to show paragraph A or paragraph B based off of choices. It could be something completely different than just metadata. Maybe we're using that metadata to decide which fragment to show within there.
Exactly. And just to show you, so I showed you the options where the user has to do the least amount of work. They just have to click a button to compose. If you didn't build out all that additional detail within workflow or workview, there is a compose button that's in the Unity client, whether you're in workview or the standard Unity client. You just click that compose, and this kind of shows you all those different categories that John showed within document composition. So if I wanted to manually generate something off of this object or this document, I can easily go in and do that. Excuse me. And then there's some different options for preview email or view document after archiving. So again, it's a couple extra clicks if you don't build out the exact template within your action or your workflow task there, but that is the other option there.
Yeah, I think that's useful, and for those of you that are newer to the document composition and interested in developing a strategy, please reach out to your account manager. If you're not sure who that is, we have our marketing address at the end of this webinar, but more than happy to talk through some different strategies with you.
Yep. And now we're going to move over to the packet generation. So again, we built it as a workflow task here. So if I click create packet, it'll bring up that interface that John showed in the PowerPoint. So you can see here we have the different documents that we pre-configured within the OnBase configuration. We told exactly which document types are associated to this. So it brought all those in there. If we click on those, we could preview them over on the right-hand side. We could change the thumbnail size. We could preview it. But one of the nice things or the big things is that we could add documents. So if there's not a document within that packet when we generate that we need, we could add it to package. So the document does have to be in OnBase, but we could use this additional tool here to add it quickly to OnBase and then add it to the packet. So if that's something you need to do on the fly.
Yeah.
Additionally, yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think that's helpful, Dan, because one of the things we didn't get into, just being time constrained, was the config for packets, but more than happy to go over that with folks in another session. But whether or not it's usually driven by something like a keyword, right? So we're looking for, I think in this case, a subset of document types that are tied to a singular member ID. In this case, it's Michael Scott's, right? So it's just grabbing everything that we've said, these are the types we want for this value.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm going to generate packet here. So another thing to keep in mind with packet generation, it doesn't have to be a user driven. It could run as a workflow task on the server. So if you don't need users to review it and you just need to like generate that packet and save it, that could easily be done on the server side.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning for sure.
Yeah, so here's the final packet all combined together. So
Awesome.
just a simple PDF that we have. All the different documents that we've generated for Michael Scott.
Yeah, and it looks like the majority of these we actually generated too. It's not so much that we even received them in, which is really good. Awesome. Well, we're running about 2 minutes over our scheduled time. I was going to open this up for questions, just if we have any from anyone. I don't think I saw any come through on the chat yet, unless I don't have access to those.
I did not see any either, but I do know that we are at time, and I did want to be respectful of the folks who have joined us today. So I will thank both of you for your time and for your expertise. And we will be sharing a link to today's recording with attendees and those who registered who were not able to join us today. So you can revisit and share with colleagues as you wish. Please do keep an eye on your email. We may be following up with a part 2. You never know. On behalf of CurieWorks, I thank each of you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.